Hello.
Hello. So what were we saying?
I don't know. Some deep shit. I forgot.
Something.
That that was a tagline I like to tag sometimes. Make art on walls, and it would just say deep one, deeper one, deepest one. But each time I do it, I would make the text a bigger three-dimensional pop. So each time I got to the same spot, I would just make the 3D illusion further and further back. It's kind of funny like that.
Well, somebody was gonna, somebody wanted somebody to explain something.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, you know what it is, and we actually got into your book a little bit, White Fragility.
Oh, you
And
asked the one that I said I was reading.
yes, so I went through a few summaries. I'm a very slow reader, so I picked up a few things. I actually got a decent amount of information from that book, but more importantly, the book actually led me to a whole little rabbit hole of a bunch of PDF files that led me to a bunch of other books about radical revolutionary movements throughout culture. And the one that I started off kind of looking into was How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And
Okay.
found that to be a very interesting book right off the introduction. And I have a hard time reading, so the fact that I was able to get through the introduction, I feel like the book is very well written. I'm excited to kind of poke around a little more. But
Yeah.
got into some of the concepts, and we're talking about attacks on communities, and we're talking about the oppressor versus the oppressor and oppression ratios and the one-sided slanted conflicts that occur. What I was saying is kind of an interesting thing is that something that's discussed a little bit in White Fragility is the problem of being exempt from being identified by your race. And this is considered something that allows white people in their identification to be colorblind to some of the issues other ethnicities deal with, because typically they're not identified by their race. Oh, Flav, you're muted right now. I don't know if you're on that purpose.
I don't know if he's aware he's muted.
Oh, so you were saying that typically white people are not identified by their race?
That was something in White Fragility that was explained, that one of the issues is that they would be exempt from being identified by their race. But what
Probably
I found,
because they're the default.
correct, yes,
The default
considered
race.
the normal. But what I found so particularly interesting about that statement is that if we could be exempt from the identification of race in general, this would help eliminate a lot of issues and conflicts with that oppression. And my opinion is formulated from the idea that when we apply for a house or home ownership, in the identification section, we're made to identify our racial background. And Seattle, I believe it was Seattle, who had recently done away with that. They eliminated that from the home ownership application because it was said that there were a lot of homeowner loan denials based on ethnicity.
Right.
So, and we've seen some studies that simply having a foreign name could actually make it difficult for you to get a job. Michael versus Jamal.
Oh yeah, Jamal Smith has a harder time getting a job than Michael Smith.
Correct. So the interesting thing to see here a little bit is that, like, one of the big issues that's talked about in White Fragility could end up being kind of like a hair of the dog that bit you formula, or like, a little dose of the problem gives you the cure, is we can kind of create a way where we can begin to exempt people from needing to be identified by racial or cultural difficulties, which is hard to say because when we talk about the ethnicity of melanin and having colored skin, for sure that is something people see, and you can't deny the reaction.
I suppose even to like somebody being gay, they could reasonably hide it because that's not something that you see without them even opening their mouth, for example.
Right, or transgenders face some issue too with discrimination, where like in one way, someone who is considered, I guess what they call passing, doesn't always face some of the difficulties of someone who may not be considered passing, because they simply just cannot change the way people are going to see them. So the real hurdle here is how can we have people free from that need to be identified by race, and step away from that constant surface identification. I know, and as an example, I've been asked to identify somebody by police officers at a time when I had seen a robbery. This is going a while back. And when they asked me to identify the person, I first started off with how the person ran and how tall the person was. And then I started seeing like, okay, well, they were wearing a red sweatshirt. And I'm describing all these things about this person, like poetically even, getting
like everything but race.
Yeah, and then they ask me, well, what was the ethnicity or racial identification of this person? And to be clear with them, it was hard to say because they were wearing a hooded sweatshirt and full-length clothing. So did I get a real good glimpse to say? No.
Right.
And I didn't enter that as information in the report. I'm sure the person in the store did, and I even said to him, I'm sure there's camera footage that you could refer to for something like that, but based on what I saw, that's all I could tell was the fitness, health level of the person. I mean, things that they were looking at me like, we don't need to know this. But I
Right.
thought, like, maybe, how far could he have ran? I even said, like, honestly, he looked like someone that could do a mile and might be breathing heavy. And they're laughing at me like, that's useless information. But I don't know, it's interesting to see, like, how we could kind of use surface as a last resort when we identify somebody. It doesn't have to be the first thing we use to identify.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because, again, the unseen off-screen character. But a few years back, like a couple blocks down from our apartment building.
Is this a Misha sighting?
Yes. But he got held. Some guy tried to hold him up at gunpoint when he was out getting Chinese food.
Oh, man.
But it was a long story. Like, I think, to be honest, like, I think what happened is, like, somebody fired a gun nearby, and the way Misha describes it is, like, that there was a gunpowder smell. And so he started sniffing his nose, like, he started making, like facial expressions, like he was confused, looking around confused about the smell. So I think that, like, the dude that shot the gun, like, was like, oh shit, this guy's gonna snitch. And then he chased him out of, like, the Chinese restaurant and pointed a gun at him saying, give me your phone, thinking that, like, Misha had it on video, whoever they were shooting.
Oh.
And which he didn't, because he didn't even have his phone. Like, he had left his phone at home. He had literally just stepped out for like 2 minutes to pick up his Chinese food and come home. So the first thing he does is he just turns around and he just runs. And finally the guy stops chasing him because our house, like, our building is much closer to the precinct. And he was probably worried about getting caught. But then we're talking about it later, and then Misha says to me, he's like, I didn't file a police report because I couldn't really tell that much about the guy other than that he was Black or some form of Afro-Latinx. And I didn't want them to falsely accuse somebody, so I just kept my mouth shut, was basically what he said. Which is
that's smart. I mean, and compassionate,
It is compassionate, yeah. I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
But this is we can get into gun control if you want at the moment.
Well, I mean,
beyond
gun control, I'm just interested in this in the way that these the two of these responses to things that happen, like, so Damien, you weren't even comfortable enough to identify the race or ethnicity of this person based on how much of them you saw, right?
Right, yeah, fully covered, hooded. I felt that his height and weight and fitness was more important to identify this person than his ethnicity would have been, especially from my perspective as a kid outside of a store who saw someone running away.
Right. And I mean, I'm certainly with you when it comes to being a proponent of not just looking at people based on race. I guess in this case, with cops, they're looking for the easiest way to identify people. But I totally respect that you're like, hey, listen, other people got a better look at this person, so ask them for that information. Don't ask me because I don't want to give you the wrong information. So I definitely have to respect that. I do find it interesting, like you did, that they rejected the other information because it's
Yeah.
like, look, if you're going to do a thorough job, it may come to knowing that this person could or could not have gotten that far away, right?
Right.
Like if you're like, hey, this person's limping, they're severely overweight, they were breathing really heavy, they were about to fall over, then hey, like do a sweep of the perimeter of like right around where we are. He wouldn't have gotten that far. Where it's like, oh, this guy's like in great shape. He could have like run, maybe a mile around, then maybe call for
Yeah,
backup
that
or
seems like it would
have
be
a cruiser.
relevant information.
Yeah, it seems like it could be relevant only if you were gonna go slightly deeper. Only if you're gonna take a little bit more effort. If you're not, it's like, too much information.
But
What do you
here's
look
the
like?
thing. What's funny is that the information that they're looking for is akin to somebody like describing me as like, oh, white girl. Well, you're not being very specific. Like,
Yeah.
like there's like 10 other white girls around. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I say that to my students all the time. I yell at them. I'm like I'll ask them what someone looks like, and even like no matter what race or ethnicity they are,
Yeah.
they always start with the race or ethnicity of the person, and they'll be like, well, he's a black guy. And I'm like, I look at them and I'm like, that's not helpful at all, guys. Do you know how many black guys there are in this school and outside on the street in front of the school? That is not helpful.
Right.
And
But everybody does it. I think even if you, like, no matter what race you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just even difficult too because there's so many diverse cultural complexions that, when you say black or you say even white, or even Latin, there's just so many other details to that get lost in this umbrella term. And I feel, again, much like what was said in How to Be Anti-Racist is, right in the introduction, he talks about just attempting to eliminate that language. Stop using the ammunition that's being given to us to shoot each other. Because the problem was never about the people, it was always the policy.
Yeah. I wonder if there have been studies done on the way different folks, like maybe different genders, assess information and then recommunicate it. Like for instance, most women have way more vocabulary in their arsenal when it comes to describing colors than men do.
I think women see in more colors. Am I right, Flav?
That may be possible. They're less likely.
I think you might be right. Like, I feel like that, like, women have more. I can't remember whether it's rods or cones that see color, but I feel like women have.
Okay.
I read somewhere that women have more of those in their eyes.
Yeah, I've always felt that way. Yeah.
And they're less likely to be colorblind.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah,
that's a sex chromosome trait. But anyway, go on.
Oh, okay. But like you'll always hear women like describe things in ways that like men just don't. They're talking about like eggshells and like all different types of colors that sound more like more like objects or.
Well, men are shape related. Women are more of that pattern of colors that I was talking about with octopi. Women definitely have that sense of propriety in that manner, and men are more. I hate to say it, but primitive.
Well, yeah, and also the level of detail is deeper. So I wonder, like, I wonder if you were a cop, if you would get like better information speaking to like a witness who was like a woman based on the level
Usually.
of detail.
They usually ask to interview the woman first, I've noticed.
Oh, really?
In a situation where there's both male and female witnesses, they tend to interview the women first.
Okay. That's interesting.
I mean, not to open a Pandora's box about talking about women again, but I will agree that like women do tend to be more detail oriented, or that women like notice things like, does something match more often? Because like, say for example, even though I'm not really into like appearance in the conventional way, like I'll still like want to wear the purple shoes on the day that I like the purple sneakers on the day that I wear the purple shirt, as opposed to wearing like the red sneakers on the day I wear the purple shirt. Whereas like I'll notice with guys that I'm around, like not so much Misha, because he has a pretty good fashion sense, but like when my dad was alive, for example, like he could walk out the door like wearing an olive green jacket and an orange shirt and a blue tie and brown pants and like act like nothing was wrong.
Right.
That's my father. That's my father in a nutshell.
Well, it had me wondering if my dad...
Nutshell, I bet that's another color too.
I bet you it is. It's probably a pastel that we're not aware of, Flav.
It seriously had me wondering, though, if my dad was trolling or if he really couldn't tell that stuff didn't match.
Right.
Yeah, some of the science on the gender distinction thing we're talking about is having to do with women having more white matter in their brains and men having more gray matter. The white matter referencing the connections between neurons, and the gray matter referencing the neurons themselves. So men have more storage capacity, but women have more ways to access that storage.
Women have more RAM, is what you're telling me.
We have more organized file cabinets in our brains.
Interesting.
Yeah, it may require women to defrag more frequently and take more me time.
I hate to give my answer on that one, Damien, because it's just going to get me in trouble.
Right, yeah, nothing. I'm sure I will receive some.
I will plead the fifth.
I don't really know that much about computers, to be honest. But I did learn a lot about gender psychology and the effects of the hormones on the developmental brain. So something cool to think about is women do have those extra connections to be.
Yeah. I mean, when people say that there's differences between men and women, they're not blowing smoke. I mean, there is differences. We're biologically different. We all, first of all, we all start ourselves as women, so it's not an issue.
Yeah, we're the default.
You're the yes, and we're the special, beautiful peacocks. No, I'm kidding, Emily. I'm just trying to get your attention.
But I was reading, it's interesting you bring that up, though, because I was reading somewhere that, like, some scientists think that being transgender or being not, like, having, like, differing sexuality and gender, like, being not heterosexual or not, like, or being transgender has to do with, like, with differing amounts of hormones that you're exposed to in utero. So like, for example, like a transgender, I'm flipping around, like a transgender woman who's like a transgender woman was born a man and had like a developed penis, but was exposed to more estrogen potentially in utero than a non-trans, than like a cisgendered man, for example. Like, it's kind of fascinating because, like the parts develop, like, the plumbing develops based on, like, the X and Y chromosomes and those genes, but exposure to differing amounts of estrogen and testosterone kind of decide, like, or kind of have been shown to have some sort of a correlation with gender and sexuality, I guess.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, there has to be some correlation, or there has to be like some kind of explanation scientifically, or you would think, depending on the level of science or understanding.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I feel like that, like, there is a difference between sex and gender, in the sense that, like, sex is a binary. Like, unless you're intersex, in most cases, you've got one set of plumbing or the other set of plumbing.
Okay.
But like gender is much more of like a continuum based on like levels of hormones in your body, I feel.
Right.
Because women have testosterone. We just don't have the same amount as you guys do.
Right.
And vice versa
you don't
for
need
estrogen.
it. You don't typically need it. That's the way
We
way
don't
our
need
brain
it,
can.
but sometimes we get it anyway.
No, yeah, of course. Like men get an excess of estrogen, then start developing, like a female chest.
When men get boobs.
Yes. I didn't want to put it like that, but yes. But the truth is that we're all we're kind of a random makeup of the spectrum, and to punish like that's why I've never understood the transgender issue. Where people have a problem with it, it makes sense if you look in nature. Nature shows us that randomness and different varieties of species have different developmental goals, and I definitely don't. I definitely don't see the problem with transgender or any other issues having to relate to where you start off in life or where you end up in life.
Yeah,
Did I make any sense at all? I was trying to make sense.
Yeah, no, that was actually, I really like how you brought it back to nature.
Yes.
But I specifically like to figure out ways to simplify these complicated topics. And that's the way I tend to simplify gender is I'll say to somebody, there's only one gender that I truly, to my hardest of heart, believe in, and that gender is known as nature. And
sure.
The nature we experience, that's to our each own individual experience. And that's yet a whole nother topic of consciousness we get into. But no matter how you cut the cake, nature will tell you the whole story of gender, and even some weird stuff along the way having to do with parathogenesis and things that lizards do that we wouldn't believe until we saw it ourselves, and just some fascinating things there. In fact, gender has a lot more complexity to it in its differences than race does. And that's something interesting to think about because there are a lot of different cultures and a lot of different ethnicities that developed in a lot of different environments. But we all still have so much more in common between ethnicities than we do between genders. And that one guy and one girl are so much more different than two guys from two different parts of the world or two girls from two different parts of the world. So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about in terms of the scientific method and how we want to approach differences that make us stronger and similarities that bring us closer together.
But I'm not sure like that there's that big of a difference even between like a man and a woman in the same place per
There's just
se.
a little more of a difference than from a
But not always, because I do find that like I said, it's a continuum, and there's some women out there who act much more like stereotypical men, but still consider themselves women. And while they might have like the physical differences, sure, like if that's what you're referring to is just physical differences, then yeah, I could see that argument of like it. But
also the hormonal developments in the brain and a few mental differences that exist between men and women to a much further difference than between two men or two women from two different parts of the world. In fact, your book, White Fragility, even specifically explains this a little bit. There's a statement that says something about like the scientific justification for slavery is a part of like a pseudoscience allowing white people
Phrenology.
in
Chronology,
power,
yeah.
genealogy,
Yeah.
allowing white people in power to hold the status quo. And
Yeah.
that status quo still exists in ways today. And it's because of an internalized structure of thought that encodes whiteness as a normal thing as opposed to anything else as an other. But like none of
Yes.
that is actually substantiated in science. There's no
None.
class or
Yeah,
course
it's a
that I can
social
take and tell you
construct.
about. Yeah, but I can tell you about
The
gender
only
psychology.
way, Damien, the only way I found out about phrenology is because my one of my majors was basically formed around phrenology in the beginning. Criminal justice in America was first based off phrenology, which is a horrible shame. But if you don't study it, you don't know what the problems are to start with. So it's been denounced. Nobody actually takes it up except for quacks and QAnon people. But
Right.
Maybe
Or
that's
the
what the Q
president.
stands for.
well, yeah,
I
there's
don't
that.
know. They can't answer any
But
questions. It's so
Damien, when you're
fascinating.
talking about the differences in genders, you're not just talking about a binary difference between men and women. You're talking about the difference between all genders, right? Is that what
Correct.
you're?
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
and
yeah.
specifically in gender psychology, like what Emily was saying, is that people get exposed to different levels of the different hormones. So I could say, like, okay, there's testosterone and estrogen, but the different combinations, or at some point I could say permutations, the different probabilities of exposure can alter things differently for each person. So this
Yeah.
is why we have um, says as we advance further in science and as we advance further in our ability to measure and detect these differences, we're finding that in fact there is a substantiation as to like why somebody would present in one gender but still have thoughts and feelings of another gender and end up in some of these tertiary categories. I'm going to call it a tertiary category. Um, so far, no one's really taken that to much offense, though I'm open to other names for the category developments. But much like how there are tertiary colors throughout the wheel, I feel like there is, got to be a way to talk about how there is a multitude of gender expressions beyond the binary. And in
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah. Well,
binary,
in some cultures, they acknowledge like at least like
right,
Sure, sure.
five genders.
correct. And the whole binary structure in general, it's a logical fallacy, the false dichotomy, we'll call it, creates that and allows that good bad binary to exist.
Yeah, we touched on this before. I do believe it's a problem that permeates our entire society, especially I think Western thought, specifically here in the United States. But yeah, the binary I think is crushing our ability to think and empathize. We see it in our politics, this red and blue binary, this left and right,
The
like you said,
duality.
right and wrong,
That's
up and
that's
down.
again, Flav. I blame
Left
the
and right.
Constitution, because the Constitution's solution for things is usually a binary yes or no. In terms of when we pass things through the Congress, or laws get put in through the Congress, or solved by the Supreme Court, we have binary answers.
Let me
And
ask a question though. Is that
sure,
a symptom or is it actually a cause? Because to
cause
me, the
to me.
Constitution is just one thing. A lot of people don't know too much about the Constitution. And the
They don't.
Constitution has to do with laws, but even the way that we treat each other and the way that we think, a lot of that stuff, some ignorant person who has no idea about the Constitution can still fall victim to those false dichotomies.
Right. And the point is that the Constitution looms large in our society. You don't have to necessarily know all the laws. You just have to know basically the gist of it to get along in society rather well. I think it's something that forms the background in the people that make and break the system, in terms of following the Constitution or not. To me, imagine it's like a creation mythos that you have of a certain people. It may not be, maybe people may not be aware of it, but they will culturally be aware of its effects.
Explain the yes or no to me. in the
Sure.
Constitution.
Sure. Oh God, not.
Well,
Can we
shall and
table
shall
this?
not.
Go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, it's something that I notice in the in OSHA guidelines is that there is a binary nature to a lot of these things in an attempt to simplify otherwise complicated, hazardous situations, but they'll stick to a language that says shall and shall not. You shall do this or you shall not do that, and this creates that that binary, which in some ways I feel like is, especially when we're talking about safety on a construction zone, that is very helpful.
Sure.
And
With people of
Well, it's like,
various
do
degrees of
not
understanding.
do this.
yeah, yes, do this and do not do this, shall and shall not, and it makes the language clear for the person having to interpret it. So when we talk
It
about the
makes it
Constitution,
idiot-proof.
Flav, I was gonna ask if you allow me to table that question
Yeah, we can certainly,
until I'm gonna research it more and give you the exact point in the Constitution where that says the things you're asking me. I can't remember at the moment and off the top of my head, so I can't answer you at the moment. But I'm almost sure I'll be able to find it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You can definitely do that. I mean, I think I'm going to take the position that as a political guy, you may be giving more power and
You're
credence
absolutely right.
to
No,
the
you're absolutely
Constitution,
right.
because I feel this goes much deeper. This whole like how many genders there are, and God and the devil. It's this false binary. Even like the way we have to treat a conversation as like I'm right and you're wrong. We never think about the myriad of opportunities in between.
Sure.
There's just this very
There's
like
no room for gray areas in
like,
a lot of cases.
Yeah, or how we say like, let's look at it in black or white, or two sides of a coin, or two sides to a story. Like, what does that even mean? How are there only two sides to a story?
well,
That doesn't even make any sense. There's
there's
like
multiple sides. That's what makes it elegant.
Yeah,
I say there's three sides: yours, mine, and the truth.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I mean, it sounds cute, but I mean, it's like if you're talking to two people, it kind of makes sense in that construct. So like, there's one side, there's another side, and then there's the truth. But then there's like, are there any witnesses? Does the scene itself tell a story? Does the environment tell a story? There's our background. So even then, like this whole like two sides thing, it's just a false construct that we've been feeding ourselves, and we try to like make everything fit into that construct. And no one ever like took a step back and said like, what are we doing and why are we doing this? To me, it's like the same idea of like the choices that we make, like, and how we like eat our fellow sentient beings, and like, how we treat each other, how we use money, how we use the police. Like, everything that we're doing is like, we're just doing it because we're just like following orders or going along. We're not like rethinking the thing,
Well, you know who else is following orders? The Nazis.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, seriously.
I mean, some of this too speaks to like a binary, I like how you said like it goes much further than the Constitution, because when we look at it, maybe like the first binary moment, like if I had to guess as far as looking back at humanity and the developments of what we know as life today, would be exactly that, the binary of life and death, and that you're either alive or you're dead. And that
was an interesting conversation.
Or I thought you were going to go with like when the egg splits or something.
The what? The egg split?
Yeah.
What, like the chicken or the egg?
I don't know, but it sounds delicious, Flav, whatever you're describing.
Right. Well, I mean, it just seems to me to be like one of the first conceptual moments where humanity has to say, it's, this thing or the other thing, what is the in between? And as we know today in modern life, we would say, well, you could be living, but like you could be just alive. And are you really living if you're just alive? And we've seen like these in between zombie states. We'll even joke in Hollywood about zombies.
People in vegetative states too.
Right, exactly. But prior to our technology and prior to those influences, at our most earliest developments, you would say, like, you know, you're either alive or you're dead. You're animated or you're inanimate. You know, as an object, it's either that you can do something or you can't do anything at all.
I'd like to go back for a second. Not that your point is not relevant, Damien, but Flav asked me if I was more influenced by the Constitution because of my politics. You know, I've considered that, and it is very vital to me, to the structure of a government, because I come from from something that was overthrown because the structure wasn't strong enough to withstand the differences. And to be honest, you might be right. I may have to rethink myself on that, but I still get the nagging feeling that our environment is shaped by the laws that pervade the land. And even if we're not aware of it, we still can be affected and even think profoundly on the subjects. But anyway,
we can definitely go back to this. I mean, I have a feeling I'm going to make a prediction, but yeah, we should definitely go back to this. I mean, I predict that what you are saying is true to an extent, that the Constitution does affect us maybe more than I'll give it credit for now, even by people who have not, quote unquote, become familiar with it. But my other prediction is that this binary thing goes much deeper.
Oh, no, by far.
That the Constitution is only a symptom of our binary thinking.
To me, it's something that adds into the factor, but it's not the factor as you're saying.
Yeah.
And Damien, let's go back to your point. Let's because I'm sorry I interrupted you to kind of clarify myself.
It was a good breaking point. I mean, it's the depth of talking about life and death is very curious. I mean, if I were to give my own personal opinion on that, I would say something like, there is only life. Like, there is no death. There is only the Force, and the Force carries on.
Oh, Yoda would be proud, sir. Yoda would be proud. Because Yoda also says absolutes are the way of the Sith, going into your binary talk, which was a profound statement in the series.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's that we look at it that life kind of has this ongoing continual momentum, and that it is either in the vessel or departs from the vessel, but life itself goes on, obla-di, obla-da kind of style. And I think it's important for us when we step away from the binary to see, like, there is a singularity, a point that connects everything. But that's why binary exists, is for Boolean logic. Like, computers use zeros and ones to represent a direct connection or something that is not directly connected. So every time there's a connection, there's a 1, and whenever it's not directly connected, there's a 0, and now you have your binary Boolean logic that can lay out some very complicated formulas and paint some very complex pictures. Even our eyes operate with an on-off kind of program. You know, though we understand so very little about how our eyes work, that was one of the concepts brought up, is that we're perceiving, you know, it's that we're perceiving a connection or something that's not connected. And then it interprets all these connections and disconnections to formulate what we're seeing right in front of us right now. So binary has its purpose as an adolescent explanation for a very complicated code or formula. But as far as living the life that we're given, stepping away from that binary or that false dichotomy might mean accepting a singularity, accepting a point of connection. And
I'm going to be right back.
Connected. Yeah, I mean, figure out ways in your life, like, how do you like to connect? And then find that might be the answer to issues. Do you have ways that you guys like to connect with others?
I always appeal to whatever symptom is in common with other. I always appeal, whether the person's a family person, and then I appeal. I talk about my family, you know, because I'm a family person as well. So I think that's a great connection with people. Basically, I basically think that people should learn to talk the same language as whoever we're talking about, whether it be the actual language or even the dialect. I'm not mimicking in a mocking way, but to be honest, a understanding so you can come across clearer to the other person. I've learned to go ahead.
It's like how back when Obama was running for president,
Yeah.
my dad's from Ohio. He grew up in Ohio and lived there till he was like 22 years old. Mm-hmm. So when Obama was running for president, he volunteered to make phone calls to Ohio because it was a big swing state and because he felt like he could relate to the people that he was calling because he knew the culture. You know what I mean? Like
Makes sense.
That kind of thing.
Makes sense. Yeah, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. If we have the same dialogue in common, if we can communicate, then everything else can flow. Everything else can flow after that. The agreement, the thing. But the problem is that we set ourselves up on pedestals that are this is my difference and I can't relate to you. And that's I find that's very negative in terms of trying to convince somebody that you're not out to take their blood or take their guns or whatever silly thing is the conflict of the day. Hello, we missed you, Emily. You went down for a second.
I'm here.
You're not out to tread on them.
Yeah, we're not out to tread on you. We're out to create a better society. Yeah. And we may disagree on how to get there, but why don't we try? Like I've always said, try the other person's path for a little while, and then hope that's enough to convince them that we're not trying to do anything bad or screwed up or corrupt. You're just trying to get along and do the best you can. That's why I like my personal journey, because I've been on both the far. I haven't been far right, but I've been right and I've been left. And now I'm sort of in the middle. And that sort of in the middle gives me a wonderful perspective on how people think on all issues having to do with
Makes
political.
Sense.
Yeah, and I enjoy it because I trust me, I like getting along with people. I like, getting to meet people and get to know them. So I was well suited for my job. So I don't know. I have a feeling language is such the key to our renewal of country and sense of society. Because if we're totally saying I can't understand you because you're from the city, or I can't understand you because you're from the country, or whatever.
Because you're from the
I've
Tower
lived in
of Babel.
both places, so
because it's a story of the Tower of Babel for sure, right.
Damien. But language is absolutely a key ingredient. Like, it's a psychic experience. It connects everybody in all sorts of different ways. But when it comes to like figuring out how we connect with others, as opposed to disconnect, so that we can avert from this whole Boolean binary logic, we could simply begin looking at mutual interests. Like you start with family, and that's a great
absolutely,
of course. But you have people that don't have family, like orphans. You have
no, and then you connect with them on other issues.
Or you have people who don't get along with their family.
Yeah, that's true. It's all true.
So something that's interesting to look for is great universal human factors. And what's worked for me across the board is a combination of art, music, poetry, and comedy, and nature. And between these things, I've found ways to connect a lot of opposing viewpoints and people who may be disconnected from a lot of typical human experiences, we'll say. So a way to help, bridge these gaps in the very diverse atypical fields that we are all taking part in is, again, to focus on something like art, which is a great start, because you got culinary arts, you've got painting arts, you've got martial
sculpture,
arts,
physical, dancing, what you name Correct. It. It's very varied.
And oftentimes I'll find with people who may not do any art, music, poetry, or comedy, I could say, oh, wow, well, you must be a natural. And the idea there is that without even realizing that they do any art at all, they're a part of some of the greatest arts in life. And life
Sure.
imitating art and art imitating life back and forth creates this dynamic or a platform on which we can all connect. And that would be something that I feel like will help fight this binary issue and provide a bridge between opposing views.
Oh, of course. Like I've always said, one of the other things I connect with is people with music, because I tend to like a little bit of everything. I'm not closed off to anything. The only thing let me think if I dislike anything. I dislike reggaeton because it's too repetitive. I can understand it perfectly. Don't get me wrong, but it's
You understand the words.
I understand the words, but there's not much to understand, to be honest. It's not a great music style to me, unfortunately.
You know, the
There
interesting
really
thing
isn't
about
much to understand.
you know the interesting thing about reggaeton, since you're talking about the repetitive nature of it, is it's literally all based on the same rhythm,
Right.
right? And it got its name from there was one dance hall song, and the beat went like don't 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 don't, and they like sampled that one beat and made a whole genre off of like one rhythm.
Are you eating ice cream again?
No,
Because I hate when that happens. All I can think about is ice cream after during the whole show.
no, I'm eating what I've eaten many a show.
Oh,
Celery and peanut butter.
yeah, I had some of that last night.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
it was good stuff.
But I feel like that, like it's interesting because oddly enough, I do like a lot more of like the current music that's coming out of Latin America. But it's not like reggaeton isn't really the thing anymore either.
No.
Yeah.
I think even swing music has a very particular nature to it, where it sticks to that 1-2-1-2 movement.
Sure.
And something we could see throughout all music genres is that's what makes the genre what it is, not so much what it does, but what it excludes. And some of the people that are into some of the dance musics will explain the difference between something like the different technos or dubsteps or a couple of the other different, very articulate names that are really describing beats per minute, and that the beats per minute end up changing what the genre is to them. I think perhaps one of the most interesting genres to look into is noise music. And
I know someone who does noise music.
nice. Silver Apples would be a band I would even particularly recommend. They were once known.
How would you describe noise music?
Well, music in and of itself is a compilation of sound and silence. Noise music would be taking a much larger picture and allowing us to kind of zoom in on one small section of a super large movement. So to us, it would seem random, but to the much larger movement of the music, it's a part of an ongoing pattern. So each song in a typical genre, its pattern goes and it ends, and that's a movement. But noise music doesn't have a particular end to each song. But the Silver Apples were a band who used this style of noise music with oscillators in a way that created popular music, which again was known as the music of New York for a long time. They were even invited to play and open up for the moon landing ceremonies, and inspired Hendrix and many other great musicians, where the Silver Apples helped liberate them from genres that they were stuck inside and
So
allowed
what was
them
this?
to,
They were from in the '60s, or
yeah, it would have been early 60s to late 60s, the Silver Apples.
Mhm.
And right at the end of the 60s, right after the Summer of Love, they had this album that became controversial because of the picture on the album, where they actually got,
Was it a naked lady?
no, that would have been widely well received at the time. But what they did that was particularly interesting and controversial is they took a picture of themselves in the cockpit of a plane with permission from a very popular airline. I'm forgetting the exact name at the moment. But what they did on the back of the album was they took a picture from an actual plane crash. So the front of the album has them in an actual cockpit, and they had to agree to sponsor that airline on the album. But then on the back, they put this plane crash. And when the airline saw this album, they felt that this was it was going to damage their customer relations, and people would be scared to fly, which was already an edgy thing because airplanes were still kind of new. There were a lot of crashes and missing planes.
Right.
So they
You're
ended
kidding
up,
me? I'm scared just hearing that story.
So that's what happened to Pan Am.
Right. Well, they fired off a lawsuit right away, and it actually it drove the Silver Apples band members into hiding. They
really?
Yeah, they literally just dropped everything and ran. Suited people came to their house to confiscate equipment based on the allegations and lawsuits, which obviously they did not have enough money to pay. And they took what they could and just went into hiding. Eventually, so much time went on. The drummer ended up passing away. But the guy who operated the oscillators, he's still alive to this day. And he was in recent times asked to come back out into the light and share some of the music, upload some of the old tracks onto YouTube, and make a reemergence. And it's kind of interesting to watch them and see that story, but it says a lot about corporate sponsorship. Yeah. And it says a lot about some of the powers that be and how they can take hold and control some of the movements that people really loved and stood behind and grew from, even, you could say. There's a lot of growth coming from that era with them.
It reminds me a little bit of that movie Josie and the Pussycats, the modern one, because the producers took all the sponsorship that wanted to be in the movie, and then they mocked them completely by putting them up like art on the wall and referencing them during the movie. And then when the movie came out, the sponsors were like, "What the hell, man?" And they used all of their power to squish down the movie. But it was pretty good.
Wait, the actual movie?
Yes, the actual movie got railroaded.
Oh wow, that's pretty dope that they did that.
Oh yeah, it was ballsy. It was real ballsy because we're not talking about like tiny sponsors. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, I want to go into more about white fragility on a conversation soon.
All right.
When we get a chance with Emily.
Well, she's about to pass.
Yeah, no, she's out right now, but it would be, I don't know how far she is into the book, but since I did all the reviews on it and everything, likely I'm going to have a little bit of a dream with some of the stuff from the book in there, and it'd be cool to reflect with her more on it to see how accurate the dream recall was from the reviews and what we can take away from it.
Yeah, I would love to see that as well.
I was gonna tell her like the noise music that I heard was like really, I had to really challenge myself to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because it was just that. It was like it was a bunch of like static and like feedback, and it was very noisy.
Yeah. One of my canvassing friends who trained me, actually, John Mannion,
Oh, that's the guy I'm thinking of. I saw John. He had a show in Brooklyn.
Yeah, he plays the fan. He plays the fan and uses a screwdriver mic attachment.
I thought I remembered that you said you were from Long Island.
Correct.
And then as soon as you said someone that trained you, I was like, huh. I wonder if he also knows John Mannion.
Yeah. He was my first training day canvasser.
Who did he say trained him?
Oh, I'm not sure. I couldn't recall that.
I've trained so many people, but I have a really bad memory for who I've trained that I run into people and they're like, Flav, you trained me. Don't you remember?
That's funny. Training is actually a lot of fun. I when I was doing the field manager training stuff, I loved taking on observers. I had a lot of fun, created a lot of unique experiences with observers. And I mean, honestly, that's, of all things, of all the public education I got to do, that was the one thing I would miss, is being able to educate fellow public educators.
Yeah, it's the coolest part of the job. because you just have that much influence and like that much you know, you can like spread your good energy and like bring people along. And like I like teaching people like my philosophy on canvassing and like showing them how I deal with like negative doors, and then showing them how I bounce back and get like a really positive experience right after. And
yeah. To name another interesting canvasser who had a very curious philosophy I like to learn from, can't recall his last name right now off the top of my head, but Noel was a canvasser who had a very unique approach that really banked on the first impression moment.
was he from Jersey?
I believe so.
Was a black guy with like puffy hair?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, that's descriptive. Yeah, no, he's a tall fella. He was actually very well fit, and he had a lot of energy. I mean, this guy
Yeah, I'm pretty
brought
sure
a lot
that's
of
him.
energy to the table. In some cases, the energy may have had a adverse effect on some people.
Mhm.
But when he did it professionally at the door, there was a greater level of control and discipline I could acknowledge. And I
Perfect.
loved his focus on the first impression moment, where someone like John Mannion had the first impression of the handshake and the importance of being able to offer the hand, even if it
Mhm.
was not accepted, but to at least extend that formal comfort.
I
And
used
then
to do that. Yeah.
and it was effective, absolutely. Some
Mhm.
people very much so prefer that. Other people I found were very averse, germs and all sorts of other concerns.
Yep.
But Noel was very quick to have a very impactful opening impression, sometimes even introducing himself as Optimus Prime, I might add,
Okay.
or Frodo Baggins. Because his
Okay.
point was that it was never about you or me or the person at the door. It was always about the idea. It was always
Mhm.
about the thing between us, and why it was so important to always go back to the issue. And
Yeah.
frankly, nobody ever really even acknowledged, like, this guy just called himself Optimus Prime.
Right.
And I found that inspirational because, there are times, like we were saying earlier, about how, like, surface judgments can take a precedence. And someone could just look at the surface or look at the first thing and make all these assumptive judgments that interrupt compassion. But if you can keep bringing the energy back to the issue and back to a central idea, then you could absolve some of these assumptions and some of these surface judgments, and really create a safe place for compassion to grow.
Yeah.
So I found the techniques interesting, and I think, to mention it here, canvassing is something I feel everyone should experience,
Mhm.
just to get to know that sense of community and escape the trap of individualism. And I
Mhm.
feel that's another thing that really speaks to the oppression issues when we're dealing with conflicts in race and conflicts with gender and conflicts with class structure too, is
Yeah.
that, we need to be able to address that individualism and how a greater sense of community exists on that. I think actually Raul mentioned something about like the myth of the individual.
Yeah.
Yep.
An interesting thing to think about.
It's not that it's a myth. It's the legend now that we have in America. Because there is individuals that we're all individuals, but the problem is that we're more interconnected than we are separate. So I never understood the need to show people that we're just so strong alone. We don't need anybody and blah blah blah. And meanwhile, we get all of our groceries from John down the store at his shop, and then we travel on roads that we all pay for, and we get educations in public schools. I mean, it's just so ridiculous, the concept that
Yeah. I
you
was gonna say, if you're like Trapper John and you're living in the midst of the wilderness and you're surviving off of the wilderness, and even at that point, you're still living off of other beings. You know.
absolutely, absolutely. We live in a web, and I think that people, because it's complicated, people don't tend to consider it valid for
Mhm.
their sense of well-being. So I live in a place that's very individualistic. Arizona is not known for its groupthink. It's more known for its quote unquote individual ruggedness.
Mavericks.
Mavericks and stuff like that. It's just and there's good parts and bad parts to everything, right? I'm not saying it's all bad. I just wish people would consider that we live in family groups. We live in societal groups. We identify with our separate tribes. We are interconnected whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I'm eating applesauce with strawberries in it.
Okay.
Just letting everybody know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, you guys are getting me a little hungry too now. I'm due for my.
Well, unfortunately, I blame Flav like I usually do because he's always eating during these shows, and it makes me starved.
Yeah. Let's say I would go finish off the rest of the asparagus cashew knish sandwiches.
Yeah, you were saying you built a bunch earlier in the chat, and I was so envious.
Hey, what was it? Asparagus, cashew?
Asparagus cashew knish. So like a potato that I'm using instead of bread. So I'll cook the knish, cut the thing in half, and then load that thing up like a sandwich with whatever extra vegetables I have, and then just glue the whole thing together with cashew cream.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, cashew cream. I've never even heard of
that's
cashew.
Homemade cashew cream?
Correct. Yeah. You get the unsalted cashews, and I swear by this, soak them. Drink the water from that first soak. Delicious cashew juice.
Really?
Absolutely. Soak them a second time, but now you want to take these nice soft cashews and turn them into a mash paste. I might even make a small video showing people how to do this because I've been doing it for a long time, and I attribute some of the effects to some of that centralized, cool, calm, control nature that I have because tryptophan is something in the cashews that vitamin B6 is also in cashews, breaks down and helps stimulate calming nerve responses, which mimic some of the effects that you might find in Big Pharma's version of Zoloft. So cashews at a high enough concentration can actually mimic some antidepressant effects. I might even go as far as recommending people to look into mugwort and doing a similar soak technique to make a tea or a brew and use that as the water instead of water because mugwort also has a whole list of vitamin Bs, B6 and B12, so that'll help metabolize the tryptophan even more efficiently, making it more available for your body. But it also carries.
I have a suggestion.
Oh,
why don't we make an On the Ish in the Kitchen episode where we talk about? Yeah, no, I'm serious. Great cooks. I'm a terrible cook. I can only do a sample. But I think it would be a fascinating show.
How about like flavor exploration with Flavius? Like Flavius.
That's right. On the Flav with Flavius.
Nice, on the Flav. Okay, yeah, there you go. No, that's a good spin pitch for sure. That's and you know, nutrition is an important topic that I think kind of.
Oh, absolutely.
It transcends a lot of the issues that we have sometimes between class structure, racial and gendered structure, is everybody can agree a good meal is a good meal. And across whatever dietary restrictions we have, when we find things that everybody can try, usually it's of some kind of great quality because a lot of care was put into it. And I think that some ways or another, the culinary arts might actually be one of those quick bridges to compassion.
I agree.
Yeah, I know when I'm doing cooking projects and working on some of my communal equity movement ideas, that's a big part of it, is my roommate and I and friends, we're always making extra. It's always, how much more can we make of this? How can we refine this process and share it? And the more we can share it, the more valuable it is.
Who do you share it with?
I'm sorry?
Who do you share it with?
Oh, well, actually, a large group of friends in the art and music community. I will distribute snack foods to. A few of them, now I've made some kind of popular snack foods called cat shoes, and the cat shoe snack treats, as well as a jam candy called Manda Jam Candies. These are, you know, they're picking up on their popularity. Actually, for my past birthday, I handed them out as goodie bags to people. And right now is a particularly difficult time because of issues with sanitary hygienic concerns. But I've refined the ability to make these things without ever needing to touch them much at all. In fact, I use a very special spoon and scraper. I use a dehydrating machine. Everything's all separately set up and straight up off the wax paper into the plastic bags. So
that's
the
great.
process is pretty good.
What's in cat shoes?
Cat shoes would be the unique almond oatmeal cashew treat that I use various flavors for. Some of the flavors are matcha flavored, which is great for late night gamers because you get that extra little boost of energy with the snack. And I also load these up with pea protein powder because.
And is this like hot? You're eating it like hot oatmeal?
No. I cook them into little chips. I actually have a bunch downstairs I could show you, but you could just imagine like little like Cookie Crisp style chips. They're little,
cool,
small, little like this. I don't know if that's a good example. They're about the size of your thumb.
I can dig it. I can imagine it.
Yeah, inch diameter. And I made a few bigger, but the smaller ones are better. Again, I'll put like a cashew, like a whole cashew right in the middle of them. Or I'll put pepitas if I want to increase the iron content to them. I'll use different whole foods to complete the flavor profile and the nutritional demand. But again, the specific focus really banks on the pea protein because a lot of my friends who are vegan miss out on some protein intake. Not that we need a ridiculous amount. I know if you're maintaining exercise, I think it's like 60 grams of protein you're expected to get. But if you're just living a regular day, regular life deal, the demand can't be that high. Still, having access to
in a day, you're saying?
60 grams a day, I believe, was the nutritional recommendation for body build maintenance. So, like,
so that's if you're bodybuilding.
Not exactly gains, like that's not like the body gains building, but that's like muscle maintenance or tone maintenance. Yeah, you would want to keep about 60. Because when you get hungry and you feel that first little like, ooh, I'm hungry moment, your body's already chipping away at a muscle mass somewheres. That's why you're feeling that little bit of hunger. So you really don't ever want to experience any kind of hunger if you're looking to keep your muscles where they are. It's kind of a weird thing to think about. Fat just isn't prioritized in the body as a fuel source, though it does end up getting used in some way or another. But your muscles are attacked typically right away, from what I've read.
Before you're fat?
Yes, your body will actually, in a state of hunger, attempt to take away from your muscles before it begins taking away from your fat. Your fat actually has to be worked off or moved or exercised to be put into use. So if you're just laying around, like that's why you'll get muscle atrophy, like because you're not using your muscles, and you wouldn't really get like fat atrophy because your fat's not really being prioritized. It's a weird thing to think about. I know a very little bit about the nutritional developments of the body. I know more about the psychological developments. But I learned from my friend who takes nutritional classes, and of course I'll do my own independent research studies, I guess you call them. Yeah, the body is a very important thing. It's to a final note really on this as we sift through subject content. That you don't really control your body. You share control with it, but when your body fails, your body fails. And that's an interesting fatalistic, deterministic thing to say, but when it comes down to it, like, there are things about our bodily developments and physiological conflicts that end up being beyond our direct control. And we can only love the idea of influencing it and listening to our bodies and doing what we feel is best for our bodies. And our attempts to try and control our bodies and make our bodies do certain things lead to strains and lead to sprains and lead to problems that, can get worse over time if you're not listening to your body. And we talked a little bit about that in the martial arts conversation, where you want to pick an art that suits your body type. You don't want to be trying to put yourself in an art that's not going to favor, what it is you are sharing control with.
Yeah.
So same thing goes with foods when you're picking a diet or line of nutrition. You want to pick something that works with your body. Like that's for me, red meat didn't work so well with my body. So at an early age, I was able to listen to my body, figure that out, and cut it right out.
Right.
Well, that's the same thing with me with pork. Unfortunately, Cubans love pork, so it's not a very fun thing to cut out in our culture. So we will see. We'll see if my abandoning of pork is a long term. I think it's a benefit, but my countrymen think I'm a traitor, even more than my politics.
Huh. Interesting point on culture and food and different cultural aspects to food.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a hard thing for people to change. It's like tradition
Absolutely.
and culture, and it's like, for me, stepping back and looking at what I was doing, I just developed a conscionable objection to you know to taking down other beings for their nutritional value. I just couldn't do it as a fellow sentient being on the planet.
And I understand and respect your stance. I don't know if I could take the same steps because of my illnesses. It would be harder to balance, I think, and I'm not quite
Yeah,
sure how
I
to do
mean,
that.
I'm no nutritionist, but many people of varying backgrounds, nutritional needs, and sicknesses have certainly benefited from a vegan diet.
I would be willing to try it if I lived in a place that was more supportive of that. For instance, if I could go out and buy already made meals vegan, I think I would try. I would think I would try the lifestyle a little bit easier.
What
But
city? What city in Arizona do you live in?
I live in a small city called Santan Valley, which is half retirement, half Mormon young families.
Okay.
And so it's very meat based. I mean, we got the only restaurant to speak of besides a Denny's is a steakhouse. It's just to give you an idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and there's not a big farming culture there, right? It's very
No,
arid
because
and hot.
it's very hard to farm in the desert.
Right.
Ranching is a little easier on the people doing it, but that's why we tend to have an excess of meat and our veggies and fruits tend to be more expensive.
Yeah, a lot of like cultural dieting things end up being a result of the environment that we live in.
Absolutely.
And even a lot of like ethnic developments occur because of environmental factors.
Oh,
Island
of course.
culture
Maize
developed.
and maize and the Mexican and the peninsula, the the Central American peninsula, maize is of course known as corn, but in Spanish that's an overall we're people of the corn in that area. I mean, literally, there's because it's just so abundant. You'd be mad not to include it in your diet.
Right. And then they have the blue corn too, and the red corn.
They do.
Yeah,
There's a whole
blue corn is
series.
good.
There's like something like 70 types of corn popularly consumed in Central and South America.
Yeah.
And then there's the children of the corn.
Yeah.
That's what I was making fun of myself.
Well, there's a great Native American story that dives into how we're made of corn. It's actually a really good story. I would save that for a time where I could do justice on it if you guys wanted to hear it as a little
story. Please research it and bring it back to us, David.
Yeah, no, it's not much research. I just it takes me a minute to kind of meditate into that modality.
Sure.
I could read the story. I like speaking the stories from memory and exercising the muscles like as a living, breathing oral tradition style way.
Right.
Because that's how it was. It was taught to me that way. And I actually ended up being fortunate enough to find these 2 workshop books that went very deep into the study of some of these cultural references. And the stories written originally, not written originally, but so much as translated originally from symbols that were drawn out in a spiral. And this guy who translated this stuff was very true to the pictures. So he did a really great job, not like anglicizing the story too much, and even risking some like grammatical misunderstandings just to stay true to like what the pictures were telling you step by step. So I really like that, and a couple of the stories really carved a space in my mind, and that was one of them, was the story of the maize, of how we were made from corn.
Well, historically in most cultures, our greatest lore keepers have been oral traditionalists. Like, for instance, in the Celtic tradition, you have the Druids. I'm trying to think, there's so many.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, well, yes, I could assume how they appeal to you. You already look like a Druid, Damien.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I take that in compliments.
No, it is. They were typically wild-haired, but they were not allowed to carry any weapons because they were already too powerful in their society. This is a true story. It's a true story. Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's funny too. I was in a situation where I was asked if I had any weapons on me. Like, do you have any weapons on you? I was like, oh, any weapons in the house or anything we should know of? I was like, no. I mean, I don't really deal with weapons. I have a few rocks and sticks laying around. You know,
they must have laughed.
Weapons is that they're like, oh, do you mean like those nunchuckas? I was like, well, no, more like literal sticks. And like right by my door, yes, I do have some sticks. I mean, like nothing too special. A walking stick, a shillelagh. Actually, I do have one of those.
Oh, that is dangerous, though, sir. That is dangerous.
Yeah, but they accept it.
What's a shillelagh?
It's an Irish club that's like, the head is unique. I don't know how to describe it.
It's all technicalities considered. It's a special walking cane with a rounded top to it, and the rounded top is particularly strong. But it has a rounded structure to it, and it was used in self-defense frequently by Irish people. But yeah, my house is weird. I don't have a shed or anything.
And by leprechauns, you forgot, Damien. Leprechauns are often shown with the shillelagh.
Yeah, I was reading an interesting thing that described like leprechauns were actually this character named Luch, and his specific shape that he would take as a miniature version of himself, which was known as like Lou Shellacon. So they felt like it was reinterpreted.
I know a Lou of the Silver Hand. Is that related to the same story?
Sure. I'm not entirely sure.
Because Lou of the Silver Hand, when he was fighting the Fomorians, which are the big baddies in Irish culture, his arm was chopped off, and he made his own hand. Pardon me.
Correct.
He made his own hand out of silver. And then he was a big time hero, like some of the other Finn Mac McCool. I think I'm trying to get his name right. I'm not Irish, as you could tell. So.
No. These are great pronunciations. It's very hard to pronounce some of these.
It's hard. But honestly, I think that I'm Celtic way back when. If you trace my roots back, there's certain people that in our culture that seem Latin, and there's certain people that seem Celtic. And I identify heavily with the Latin side of my past, but something draws me spiritually towards the Celtic side, and they spread all over Europe. So we were on the tip where Portugal is usually called. They were on the tip of there, and Galicia as well in Spain.
It's interesting to see how cultures get diffused like that.
Oh, it's fascinating. We all bleed into each other, which is the reason I have darker hair and a dark beard is because I have Moorish blood in me, Jewish blood. Everything is a mix eventually. It just depends on how much travel your particular society does.
When you were talking about all the different types of corn, that folks are into, it reminded me of the fact that we're like, the way we're treating food, we're just like eating the same strand of like bananas like over and over again.
Oh yeah.
And there's like so many different types of varieties that we're just like leaving on the table. when I went to Ghana, I got to eat these like smaller, sweeter varieties of banana. And they
Oh,
just
those
had
must have
like
been
a different,
delicious.
yeah, they just had a different taste to them, and it was just like, just makes you sad to like be eating this like,
Same old, same
genetically,
old. Yeah.
yeah, genetically similar or modified, yeah, same old banana over and over again when there's
Yeah,
variety.
but you know what is I think that some people actually capitalize on that in our culture and try and bring new stuff to the table. Like I really like what Trader Joe's does with its varieties of everything. Basically,
Yeah, I
they
wish I
try
had
and
one near me.
I wish I had one too. I think it would go like gangbusters here and with these young families.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, what rules the roost here are these mega big chains of supermarkets. It's the only thing that's close by to me, and
Oh
they
yeah.
provide some variety, but usually not very good variety.
Yeah, the sprawl of some of those states is kind of rough, and the states start like bleeding into each other when like
Yes,
this like sprawl just looks like sprawl no matter where you go, and it's just like
sure.
so ugly and corporate and it's just like
Yeah, but sometimes it's able to create spaces where you get unique cultures inside of it, right? Like when I lived in LA, you could see the different cultures in different neighborhoods. And it was great to like basically travel the world on your bike, and you just travel from neighborhood to neighborhood, having a feast of stuff and encounters with people that are different than you. And it's really cool. For me, it was cool. A lot of people found it annoying that they wouldn't go into certain neighborhoods. Me, I would love to go into the Chinese, the Korean neighborhoods. I lived in a Korean neighborhood for a
wait, but
short time.
what does that have to do with like big corporate
Oh,
sprawling grocery stores?
because in LA you have the big sprawling sprawl of the thing. And what happened was that unique cultures came in, took over areas, and set up their own businesses to for that. So they actually that is an example of sprawl fighting back against the corporate machine.
Yeah, that's right, but I don't give that credit to the corporate machine. I mean, that's
No, I'm
communities.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's communities thriving in spite of.
Yeah, and that's not too unusual when a sprawl gets to a certain age. I mean, New York itself is a good example. When New York was new, you had basically large corporations owning mass sectors of where people lived, depending on their ethnic backgrounds.
Okay.
And what happened over time is that those people moving in set up their own competition, and people that coming in favored that competitive spirit, and
Yeah.
they broke the corporations. I actually feel that the corporations are given too much credit for their influence. If
Yeah.
if you try, you can break them. No one is perfect. And in capitalism, in real capitalism, I'm not talking about the vulture capitalism we see
Sure.
popular today.
Sure.
Competition is not only favored; it's desired for the customer.
Yeah. Yeah. In some neighborhoods, like in Park Slope, certainly in definitely in certain zip codes of Park Slope, it's it's like Starbucks is like zoned out. You can't
Yes.
have Starbucks in certain zip codes of Park Slope. In others, you definitely see them.
Yeah, I was there when I was there in 2002. It was a long time ago. I know, guys, don't date me. But when I was there in 2002, the bizarre thing was that in Manhattan, Starbucks was like you'd be on one side of the street from a Starbucks, looking right across into another Starbucks, and I
Yep.
wondered how these things choke each other through their density tricks.
How do they not choke each other?
Not choke each other through the business, because one I understand this was when they started to spread like wildfire and there was no stopping them,
Yeah,
but
well, basic basic economics. You go into one Starbucks and there's a line, and so you can just go right across the street to another one and kind of diffuse
the line. Yeah.
diffuse the line.
Also,
and, I mean,
coffee is
McDonald's was
really
like
big.
the first one doing stuff like that.
Oh,
You see
absolutely.
McDonald's on top of each other.
Yeah. I've seen McDonald's on one side of the block, and then on the end of that same block, there's another goddamn McDonald's, and you wonder. And they're usually owned by the same parent corporation, which is not McDonald's. Of course, everybody knows that McDonald's is a franchise, but the odd thing to me is that these franchisees usually swarm an area with their product. Then they have to scale back, which is terrible. In fact, for the employees who basically get treated like disposable items, which is what I despise the most.
Or for the business that gets pushed out.
Right. Even worse for the poor businesses that are small scale, they get pushed out because they can't compete with the low prices. But the low prices come with their own costs. I've always said,
we're subsidizing.
Yeah, we're basically what happens is just to explain it to the audience, we end up covering the costs of what because if you sell things at $1 and $2, there's no way you're going to be able to pay your employees at any amount that's considered fair or living wage. And if that happens, what happens is that the people will not die. They will ask for help from their local governments, and the governments more or less will try and give it to them because it sustains their economy. However, that's always a drain. People don't talk about that drain because it's ugly, and there's no easy answer to replace the millions of people that are employed by Walmart or let's say Amazon. Well, Amazon is a little better, a little. I'm not talking about a bunch, but they're a little more competitive, a little more like in terms of a living wage.
But they're also much bigger.
Yes, they could pay their people a living wage. One chain that I definitely recommend because their economics matches their ethics is Costco. I know it's a weird recommendation, but Costco pays their people a decent wage. They treat them with respect. They are not disposable. And they provide a great service to the community. So what can I say? More companies need to be like Costco.
Also, I just want to flesh out that picture that you painted. I mean, it's not just simply, McDonald's offering low prices and therefore not being able to pay their employees who have to go on public assistance. McDonald's is still making a shit ton of money for themselves. So they really could pay their employees, but of course they're also getting our money too, right? Not just the employees getting it for the
I never said any different. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that that's clear to the listeners that it's not
gotcha.
Not just that they're offering us such low prices.
Gents, I have to grab a drink. I'll be right back.
Yeah, hey, let's why don't we pause it until another time?
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we come back? But I think tonight was great. We should have some good stuff to put up.
All right, Flav. Cool. Good night, Damien.
Good night, folks.
Great catching up.
All right, good catching up. Peace.